Deja vu. Melissa didn't often have nightmares, but last night was different. She found herself at the edge of town, down a road she did not recognize. In front of her was a long dirt driveway covered in weeds. The driveway led up to a strange old house. The paint on the house was cracked and peeling, and the window shutters hung crooked. It looked like no one had lived there in a very long time. The longer Melissa looked at the house, the more uncomfortable she got. A knot began to form in her stomach, and she felt sick with fear and dread. Even though the house scared her, Melissa continued walking towards it. It was as though she could not control her body. Closer and closer she got to the rickety front porch. All the while, the bad feeling in her gut grew worse. Finally, right as Melissa was about to take a step up onto the porch, there was a loud, blaring noise. It was her alarm clock. Melissa had been startled awake and was ripped out of that terrible nightmare. She had never before been so happy to be awoken for school. Even though the dream was awful, Melissa did end up forgetting about it. She had a good day at school and was thrilled to have been invited to sit with the cool kids. It seemed like it was going to be the perfect day. They even invited Melissa to hang out after school. The group had decided that they would go riding bikes around town. Melissa didn't have a bike of her own, but a popular boy named Tommy allowed her to ride with him. They had so much fun whizzing around town. But everything began to change when Tommy decided it would be fun to take a detour to the edge of town. Little by little, that uncomfortable feeling in Melissa's stomach returned. The farther they rode, the more she began to recognize her surroundings. But this made no sense. Melissa knew that she had never been here before. She told this to the others, and they said she was just experiencing something called deja vu. It was an interesting feeling where you strongly believe you've seen, heard, or done something before, even though you never have. This didn't get rid of the icky feeling, but Melissa accepted this answer. It was when they came across a weed-filled dirt driveway at the very end of town that Melissa could no longer ignore the bad feeling. She was having deja vu again. She knew this old driveway, as well as the run-down old house that stood at the end. Melissa gasped and pointed at the house. She said she had a very bad feeling and didn't want to go near it. But the other kids were very excited. Since the house clearly seemed to be abandoned, they wanted to find a way inside and make it their secret base. Against Melissa's wishes, the group got closer and closer to the old house. That feeling of deja vu struck again. Everything was exactly the same as in the dream, right down to the peeling paint and crooked shutters. Melissa was very scared now, and told the others she didn't want to get any closer. The other kids scowled at Melissa and asked her if she wasn't cool enough to hang out with them after all. Melissa felt herself blush in shame and lowered her head. She shook her head and apologized and continued walking toward the house with the other children. It was right as Melissa got to the porch that she couldn't take any more. It was the same spot that her dream ended, and she refused to get any closer. The other kids laughed at her but continued walking up toward the crooked old door. Melissa didn't care if the others made fun of her. Her heart was almost beating out of her chest. The feeling of dread in her stomach was unbearable. Just then, she lifted her head and looked up to the porch. There was something she hadn't noticed before. Leading from the stairs to the door was a dark, rusty stain. It looked like blood. It appeared something gory had been dragged from the porch and into the house. Melissa then looked up to the door itself. Near the top was a little glass window to peep out at guests. Behind the glass, Melissa saw a pair of eyes staring out at them. These eyes were an eerie, unnatural yellow color and looked evil. Melissa screamed and pointed to the eyes. Hearing this, the other children looked up and saw the eyes too. Then they looked down and saw the trail of blood. Just then, the doorknob began to rattle and turn. The children screamed and ran for their bikes. Lucky for them, the door was so old and crooked it seemed to not work very well. Because of this, whoever was inside appeared to be having trouble getting it to open. The children were all on their bikes and quickly pedaling away when they heard the loud crash of the door finally opening and the deep, gravelly shouts of a man yelling after them. Melissa had been too scared to look behind her, and Tommy refused to tell her what he saw. His face went pale and he simply said that he didn't want to talk about it. Melissa figured it was better that way. Tommy dropped her off at home and didn't speak another word. The following morning, while Melissa ate breakfast, her father turned on the TV to a news station. Normally, Melissa didn't pay attention to this, but the words caught her attention. The police were on the lookout for a suspected murderer. They thought he was hiding somewhere in their city. The TV then flashed an image of a drawing of the killer, and Melissa's stomach cramped. Staring back at her were the same eerie yellow eyes. Melissa never did get that deja vu again, and she also never ignored the feeling in her gut when it told her that something just wasn't right.